For week 10, discussion 6, I chose to describe the brainstem respiratory centers. The brainstem respiratory centers are the automatic unconscious cycle of breathing. It is controlled by 3 pairs of respiratory centers in the formation of the medulla oblongata and the pons. And there is one on each side, so that there's 3 of the pairs. And the 3 pairs are the DRG, dorsal respiratory group, PRG, potent respiratory group, and VRG, ventral respiratory group. And the 2 sides communicate with each other. The pairs communicate with each other to contract respiratory muscle symmetrically, so at the same time. And so I chose to just draw the outline of the brain, and this is like the stem, and we have the pons, and then the medulla oblongata. And the first cycle is the ventral respiratory group. So the VR, which is going to be this one right here. It's the smaller one. So I made a little chart for that. And the ventral respiratory system is the primary generator of the respiratory rhythm. And there's 2 commingled webs of neurons, the inspiratory neurons and the expiratory neurons, and each create a reverberating neural circuit. So it ends up going back and forth. It just keeps repeating itself. And the inspiratory neuron, which is this first one up here, it fires for about 2 seconds at a time, making nerve signals to the integrating center of the spinal cord. And that spinal cord is down here. So I have the VRG, and it's sending signals to the spinal integrating center. And the spinal center relays signals through phrenic nerves to the diaphragm, through intercostal nerves to the external intercostal muscles. And those are going to be between these rib cages. This is my drawing of the side view of the ribs and the diaphragm. And when these muscles contract through the inspiration, it creates the thoracic cage to enlarge. So it's enlarging or inflating, and then the expiratory nerves start to inhibit. As the inspiratory neurons stop firing, the expiratory neurons begin firing. So this is basically breathing in, and this is breathing out. And these are causing muscles to relax when it's expiration. So breathing out. The thoracic cage expels air from the lungs, so it's removing air, so it's pushing up, and the inspiratory neurons are pushing down, and expiration neurons are pushing up. And it takes 3 seconds for the process. Once expiration neurons actively slow down, inspiratory neurons resume firing. So then it just continues and it goes back and forth. This process is a respiratory rhythm of around 12 breaths per minute. Then we go on to the DRG, the dorsal respiratory group, which is going to be this one right next to the VRG. It's going to be this one right here. And the dorsal respiratory group modifies this basic respiratory rhythm. It is a web of neurons that extend to the length of the medulla. So they start the neurons start all the way from up here, all the way up from the brain, and then make their way down. So the green, which is the output from the hippocampus, the limbic system, and the higher brain center, all come down to the dorsal respiratory group. And these webs of neurons receive input from those sources, and they receive input from the chemosensitive center and the central chemoreceptors too. So they come from over here and go to that dorsal respiratory group. And this, the chemoreceptors in the center and in certain major arteries stretch and are in the airway and other higher brain cell stems. And they allow for emotion influence on breathing. So if we're crying, laughing, all that stuff, it helps us to be able to breathe and maintain that breathing cycle. Next, we have the Pulmonary Respiratory Group, or PRG. And the PRG is going to be this one right here, right in the pons. And the PRG on each side of the pons and receive input from higher brain centers, such as the hippocampus, limbic system, and cerebral cortex. So they're also starting from up here as well and coming down. And this issues output to both DRG and VRG. So it's putting an output to both the DRG over here, dorsal respiratory group, and the ventral respiratory group. So it's giving out those outputs. And in turn, it delays the transition from inspiration to expiration that makes each breath shorter or shallower or longer or deeper. And then the PRG adapts to breathing when we are asleep, exercising, and vocalization and emotional responses as well. Thank you.